I'm gonna be the man who takes some next to you. When I go out, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who goes along with you.
Say, hey, this is the story for Gary.
So I'm Jeffrey. I'm with his oldest daughter, Mindy. And so we're just walking around and seeing if people would like to say some words about Gary or not. So if you have a really bad story, that would be the best. Or a nice story.
Well, we just went to high school together, and I knew him from that. So, and then I got something in the mail, and so I just thought I'd come out and just honor him. But
I really like Gary a lot. He was very funny.
Yeah.
Yes. Always had a great joke.
Yeah.
Gary used to drive my FBI father crazy. Strictly disciplined home. And he could just crack a joke. And it took the pressure off us. But sometimes he was just so funny that my dad had to laugh.
Oh, he's that good.
Yeah, and here's the deal. You don't sweat it to a guy that's got a .38 revolver on his hip when he walks through the door.
Good to meet you.
You seen the movie Wedding Crashers?
Yeah.
I don't know anybody here. I just came for free food.
Excellent. I think they came for more than just food at Wedding Crashers.
Actually married an Osland daughter. So.
Right on.
That was my ticket.
Smart man.
Gary and I, way back in 1966, were roommates out in Linton, Oregon.
Linton, Oregon.
And we lived in an old house on the upstairs. We called the place the Bay of Pigs.
And why did you choose that?
Well, because we didn't do a lot of housekeeping. I'm not a good housekeeper. Gary was worse.
Gary worked at Plaid Pantry out in St. John's while I was going to school. And while you were working at Plaid Pantry, if you took anything from the store, which was okay, but you had to write down what you took and how much it was and then sign your name.
Okay.
So one night, it was late, it must have been 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, there were 3 or 4 of us who were drinking beer and we're out of beer. And we didn't have any money, and Gary said, no problem, I'll go to Plaid Pantry and open it up and we'll take a couple of cases of beer, which is what we did. We went inside and he wrote down what he took. His name is Gary Taylor. And we left the store. As soon as we walked out, a cop car pulled up with the lights going and hands up in the air. And we were trying to explain what I just told you. And the guy and Gary said, yeah, you just write your name down on a piece of paper. And the cop said, oh, I got to see this. So we went back in, and Gary said, look, there's my name. And the cop said, show me some ID.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow.
True story.
I don't have so many stories. I can just say that Gary and I were in the same pledge class for the fraternity. My name's Gary. Of course, there are 2 Garys, 2 Daves, and a Pete in our pledge class. And Gary's the one that kind of pulled us all through that process, you know.
Yeah.
Very easy going, and he just he made things happen. You know? And Ed down here went to high school also with Gary too.
Yeah. So can you say your name for the camera?
Gary Pearson.
Gary Pearson. So did you get confused with Gary?
No.
Sorry. If he would do something, you would get accused of it?
No. He was very distinctive. You know, you always knew it was Gary.
All right.
He did something.
Gary and I met in high school. Our freshman year, I think, so we were like 14 years old.
Yeah.
And we've known each other ever since.
Yeah.
And I have so many memories, I don't know where to...
So that's like 5-10 years ago you guys met.
Yeah. Seems like it.
Yeah. And what was the high school you guys went to?
Central Catholic.
Okay.
Yeah. I was saying that I used to get off the bus on like 26th and Hawthorne, and then walk over to Stark where high school was.
Yeah.
And there was a place about a block away from the high school where everybody congregated to smoke cigarettes. you know, you had to be a block away to hide from the priests. And that's where I could always find Gary. And I might get a few drags in myself, you know, before going to class.
Oh, that's great.
But no, he was just a great guy and a good friend. And
this is the man that Gary saved his life. This is the guy.
I didn't.
Really? How so?
Well,
I should tell the story.
Yeah, you should tell the story.
Saved my life.
Yeah. That's what you say.
Well, it was at Yaws. Yaws, top notch.
Okay.
And we were in college. There were two of us, Andy Bernard and myself.
Okay.
And we had been drinking.
Okay.
Really?
We were goofing around and walking around. Next thing we know, we got surrounded by about 7 guys who picked a fight with us.
That's not fair odds.
Not fair. And they jumped us.
Okay.
And I didn't get hurt. But my buddy did. He got black eyes and all kinds of stuff. Well, in the middle of this melee that was going on, Gary showed up.
Okay.
And he jumped into the pile and cold cocked about 5 or 6 guys.
Really?
And we just cleaned their clocks and they took off running.
And did he know you guys?
Oh yeah,
fraternity
he was a
brother.
fraternity brother.
Your fraternity brothers at that point.
Yeah, he saw us in trouble back there in the street somewhere. Yeah.
And he didn't even like it.
Exactly. Especially after that, because I was
in
enjoying
trouble.
myself so much. You know, in a fight with a bunch of guys.
He didn't get hurt because he could run faster.
The quicker one.
No, there was.
So now I'm wondering who started the fight. Did the two of
they
you start the fight, or the 7 of them
No, I
started?
didn't. We didn't.
No, not you. The other guy.
There was about 6 or 7 guys jumped us. Yeah, I don't know where they.
Now, when he told me the story, there was 3 guys, but now it's gone to 7.
No, now that I think it was 8 or 9.
Yeah. And you guys were already fraternity brothers. So Gary's part of it.
I was probably 19 or 20. Gary was 18 or 19. Yeah, Gary was a year younger than I. But he just jumped right in and just knocked a bunch of guys all over the place.
Wow.
So they took off running. Gary was a tough guy. He really was, and a gentle guy.
A gentle guy.
Gentle, and he could be tough when he
The
wanted.
extremes.
Have a pleasure to be here, and with me is Carolyn Green, who is also a longtime friend of Gary's. So, with that, the first thing we're going to have tonight is Gary's brother Mark is going to play the bagpipe. So, with that, Mark, you're on. Gary actually taught Mark that he used a Buddha bag and a little straw, but that's the way he taught Mark to do the bagpipe. So with that, and now I think Gary's older brother Todd is going to come up and share some thoughts with us. Todd, well, not older than Gary, oldest brother.
Well, I'm now the older brother. I had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with Gary in his final months and days and hours. And Gary was actually moved to a care facility in Noel where we live. I just wanted to share some remarks and just pray a blessing over this evening. You know, in the Bible, the word loving kindness is mentioned 176 times, which refers to the goodness and graciousness of God to man. And I think that expression could apply to Gary's life. He was just a really good guy who was kind, extremely loving, and helpful to those around him, his family, his friends, and his associates. Gary eventually became a big guy, and he had a ginormously large sense of humor. In the book of Proverbs, it says that a merry heart makes a cheerful countenance, and it's like medicine. Research shows that kids laugh up to 100 times a day, but as adults, we only laugh a few. And research has also shown that laughter and a well-rounded sense of humor is a sign of intelligence. So Gary must have been very intelligent. But you know, some people are just class clowns, and they never grow up, and they only do it to draw attention to themselves. But Gary had a genuine gift. He could inject humor into any situation with a quick joke or comment. And the result was an instantaneous, relaxing, or enlightening of any tense situation or pressure-packed meeting. Actually, all of us siblings got a healthy dose of dry British humor. And British humor is very heavy on self-deprecation, almost undetectable sarcasm, and a constant deadpan delivery. The key to understanding British humor, though, is to know that you're not supposed to take yourself too seriously. And I think that's an important life lesson that Gary taught us, and to all those around him. We grew up in a large family, and I just wanted to introduce them so you could see them. My brother Kent, who stand up. There he is.
I'm the one that had pants on, not a skirt.
He retired as a city manager at McMinnville a few years ago. My brother Mark, back there playing the bagpipes, just retired as the deputy chief of the Bend Fire Department. And my sister Karen, who's retired and living over in Baker City, who worked for the state. And sister Jan, who was retired as a longtime teacher in Vancouver. And we have some extended members, our cousin Katie, who came out from the Midwest and lived with us, and then eventually her mother, and Katie and my brother had some real adventures. They used to cover for each other when they went out, doing things that an FBI agent does not approve of. And her sister Mary Ann, who eventually came out here. Okay, great. Now, you got to understand, when you're living with an FBI father, it's a very strict household. So Gary took the pressure off his siblings with his witty remarks to our very stern disciplinarian father. I mean, you don't sweat it. It's all cool. No big deal. It's not exactly what most people would say to a guy that walks through the front door with a .38 on his hip. Sometimes our super serious dad would just have to laugh because Gary was just that funny. You know, he never lost his sense of humor through the 9 months that he was ill and bedridden to the very end. Now, he would say things like this, and this is an actual quote. I've actually got it pretty good. I got a mountain view out my window. I watch TV all day. They bring me anything I want. I push this button, and I can poop in my pants, and I don't even have to get out of bed. And he says, that's a pretty sweet deal. And Gary had this ability that Groucho Marx had, where he could roll his pupils 360 degrees whenever he would make this sarcastic remark to the nurses. One thing Gary was a protector of his siblings, his family, and his friends. And I've already heard some stories from some of his fraternity brothers and classmates from high school. But as a young child, one of the pictures here, Gary, you saw where he was in this plaid Mackinac coat with a hat on, and I'm one of those pictures and he's holding my hand. That's a fond memory of mine. When I was in the 7th grade, before I found a weight room, I was an athlete. I was probably about 4.5 feet tall and weighed 90 pounds. And I was no match for a 6-foot school bully who walked up to me and gave me a sucker punch and literally knocked me out cold on the schoolyard. So late that night, my brother Gary, who was then a freshman in high school, went and found him and returned the favor. My father used to say, I don't want to ever hear of you starting a fight. But if you're in a fight, by God, you better finish it or you're not coming home. Gary finished a lot of fights. I think more importantly, later on, Gary was a great mentor. He invested himself in the success of others, and I think that's evident by the number of people in the real estate community that came out here this evening. Many people spend their careers focused on themselves and climbing over the backs of other people to gain accolades and material things. But Gary bent over backwards to teach people the tricks of real estate. But also he was an encourager and an exhorter. He built real teams of people and he rejoiced in their individual success and accomplishments. And some of those people were a core group that just followed him wherever he went. Gary received many accolades and prestigious awards in his professional career, as many as you know, but he was humble and totally focused on the needs of others. We're getting at the end, I think. I think he exemplified the message of Apostle Paul to his epistle to the Thessalonians, where he said, encourage one another and build one another up. Gary just was not a fighter in a physical sense. He really fought the good fight of faith with his illness. He had many medical conditions going against him, but he fought hard and he rallied many times. You know, his greatest desire was to get back home, not to get back to work. He loved his family dearly. In his final days and hours, he come to terms with his physical limitations in his body, and he found peace with God. His final night, he was largely unresponsive all day, but he said, I love you, and gave a kiss to his wife, Adriana, and then he passed on peacefully a few hours later. I think Gary's words of wisdom on life that he would give to you could be summed up in these words of the Apostle Paul in the Epistle to the Romans. Don't think of yourself more highly than you ought to think. Don't have exaggerated ideas about your own importance. Instead, have wise thoughts. And from the book of Galatians, in love, serve one another. In other words, just like Gary lived his life. He was unpretentious, lighthearted, big-hearted, and he invested in the lives of others. Let me just pray. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for Gary's life, a life well lived. And we thank you for all the wonderful people that have come here tonight to share in that. And we ask that your peace that passes all our human understanding, which guard our minds and hearts. And may the Lord bless you here and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you, be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance to you and give you peace. Thank you.
Right now, Adriana chose not to make any remarks, but she wanted to specifically thank you all for coming. She really appreciates the attendance here and the honoring of Gary. But at this time, his ex-wife Kathy and Mindy, his daughter, and possibly Kelsey want to make some remarks. So they're going to come up and we're going to have a family time.
First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming. It's a wonderful tribute to Gary that you're all here. I met Gary back in the fall of 1966 at University of Portland. He had just come back from the Army then. And then that was the fall of 1966, and we were married 2 years later in December of 68. Marriage and relationships are about sharing, they're about caring, and they're about gifts. And the greatest gift that Gary and I gave each other were our two daughters. We've been so proud of them. And Mindy lives in Washington, D.C. She works for the Army Corps of Engineers. Jeffrey has traveled many times with her out to see Gary. Kelsey lives in Grants Pass, and she and Aaron, her husband, have a commercial design and construction company. And they're the proud parents of William, our grandson, who's my shining light. So the love that we have with our daughters has brought us through. Gary was wonderful and brought that love through, as you saw in the pictures, raising the girls. We shared each other's family and others sharing. My brother Paul is here tonight. My brother John's back in Nashville, but he said he was toasting a beer to Gary today. He sent us a text about that, saying that Pabst Blue Ribbon was the premier beer in Nashville. So, a little different. But Gary, our family loved Gary's jokes. They loved the funness. We spent every Christmas up in Seattle with my family. That's where the girls had all their Santa. Santa came to them at Christmas. And then we all went to Hawaii many times, as you saw in the pictures. Gary would go out with his video camera and take pictures of everything that we did. And then we'd come back to the condo, and he was so excited when he could finally hook it up to the TV and show us, because Gary was just a gadget guy. Everything was about gadgets and fun. So he hooked those up, and we would have our poo-poos and watch the videos. They were wonderful times. He shared his family with me. The Taylor family has been incredible. They are so fun-loving. Spending time with Max and with Grace. After being married 40 years, Grace was actually, my mother had passed away early, so Grace was my mother-in-law longer than my mother was my mother. A wonderful family. And there's always laughs. And if you see Emily and Ben and Molly and Anna and Scott, the cousins, they're here too. And if you see little Max, he's got hair just like the baby pictures of Gary. Where's little Max? Back there. Back there. So look at little Max. Anyway, then besides that, we would, after we would have Thanksgiving with Gary's family. There would be 25, maybe 30 people. Always fun, always laughing. The day after Thanksgiving, we would get up early and go to Fred Meyer's and get those early hour poinsettias. Some years it was 40, some years 50, and by this last office, I think it was 80, because Gary liked gifts, and we would go take them and put them on each sales associate's desk for when they came in afterwards. So lots of you are here from the real estate industry. I just thank you so much for coming and supporting Gary. He loved all of you. I can remember driving in the car, this is before just when cell phones were starting, and there'd be a call and he would say, okay, on line 5, put this, on line 12, put this. And I mean, he just had it all down, and he always wanted to help. The other people that he shared, or we shared, were our neighbors on Bluegrass Way. The neighbors on Bluegrass Way, you saw the one picture with the fireworks. That's where we raised our family. For 35 years, we lived there, about 35 years. And wonderful memories of those people. And I'm so happy that so many of them came tonight. It means a lot to the girls. And can't help but want to mention the fraternity. They're all back there. Can you, the group of fraternity people, raise your hands? And wives and significant others. They go back not only to University of Portland, but I'm sure many of them will speak to tonight, back even to high school with Gary. They're loving, fun friends. Many of them came and saw Gary when he was in the hospital. In fact, we were going to have the internment was yesterday, and at first it was going to be family only. And Adriana texted me and said, "You think the fraternity brothers would like to come?" Because they were Gary's brothers. So they came in full force, and it was wonderful. So. And then the fraternity brothers, the neighbors, the friends, all of these have helped to shape our lives. Gary became very ill in November, and by February, Adriana told Kelsey that Adriana and Kelsey were doing a night vigil, and had Mindy flew in from DC, and she said I should come up. I had not spoken to Gary in many years, or to Adriana, but I came up and I walked in the room, and Ken, you were there, Todd was there, Joyce was there, and Kay was there, Katie was there. And Kelsey and I walked in, we had to gown up because he had the MRSA. And I walked up and I saw him. First thing, he reminded me of his dad. He looked like Max. And then I walked up and his eyes were barely open and his lips could barely open. Those of you who visited remembered that. And I just took his hand and leaned down and said, "I love you," because I do. And at that time then reached back, and Adriana came up and stood by my side. And his eyes opened wide, and he took 2 fingers and he went like this, back and forth, because he couldn't talk. And I said, "Yes, we're both here together." And it was at that time, in that moment, that I experienced something I never knew, and it's genuine forgiveness that came from my heart. And it was a loving moment for all of us in that room. And it was so wonderful because it's made all of this possible, and the last 9 months of his life so much easier on the family and all of us. So it also was one more time of sharing. Gary was able to share, and Adriana share Adriana's family. And I now have gotten to meet them and know them. And I saw the tremendous love that Adriana had for Gary, and still has, and the fact that she stayed by him day after day for those almost a whole year that he was hospitalized. So I want to thank all the people who have touched Gary's life, that Gary has touched, and didn't mean to talk this long, but it's just wonderful that you're here, and I want to turn this over to my daughters. Thank you ever so much.
So I'm Mindy, I'm the oldest daughter, and I wanted to share a few lessons that I learned from Dad. Mom touched on a lot of them. One is that Dad very clearly instilled in me that it's great to have fun just for the sake of having fun. You don't need a reason. So and this was expressed in so many different ways in his life, whether it was conversation, just making light of anything and infusing that infectious laughter into every conversation. Or it was, hey Mindy, it's about 5 o'clock and this is when we live down on the river. Like, let's go get in the boat. And it's the time when the tugboats come back and they don't have a barge, so they create these giant waves. Let's go hop the waves. And so he'd take me out in a little boat, never mind that it leaked or whatever, it didn't matter. And we'd just go hop the waves and have a good time. And that's what Dad was all about. Another great story, this one. I was in high school and Mom and Dad made it very clear I needed to pay for half of my first car. So I got a 20-year-old Saab. It worked. Cost a lot to maintain, but it was a good car. And for some reason, Dad picked me up from high school one day in my car. I don't remember why that was. And we're driving up the hill coming from Westland High School. And my car starts making this noise. It's like, wee! I'm like, Dad, what are you doing to my car? And he looks over at me like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, what's that noise? And he's like, please tell me that this is not the first time you've heard that noise. I'm like, yes. And he's like, oh. He's like, Mindy, that is your turbocharger. He says, you need to learn how to use that. and that was a great example of Dad. He's like, you have fun when you use the turbocharger. Let me show you. We got home in record time. And I have many great memories of Dad. He's like, well, let's go take the roller coaster road home. And that was Wildwood Road up in Hidden Springs before there were houses on it. So Dad loved to have fun. And oftentimes, those types of experiences were accompanied by the phrase, you don't have to tell your mom about this. So I just showed a few. There's many more. Another thing Dad always instilled in Kelsey and I was don't let your gender hold you back from doing things. I think I learned to mow the lawn when I was like 8. Then learned to edge when I was 10, was helping build sprinkler systems with the Hogues and the Colemans and moving bark dust. He taught me how to split wood, and when we'd be sitting there watching football, he'd look over at the wood stove and go like this, which meant the wood pile's low because we had one that was a little cubby in the brick wall, which meant time to go bring the wood in. And another was this, which meant that was the little place where you put the kindling. So time to go bring the kindling in. So he taught me a lot and encouraged Kelsey and I just, don't worry about gender barriers. He also put us to work building our haunted house. Every year we would completely convert our garage to a haunted house. And we'd have hundreds of neighbor kids come through there, which was a great time. We had a lot of good memories. We build all the little gadgets, make bloody people fall from the ceiling and stuff like that. And another great lesson about gender he taught me with that was that the neighbor boys scream just as loud as the neighbor girls when they're inside the haunted house. And then he also taught me to always be practical more than theoretical. Dad was a gadget man. He always had his hands on things, trying to figure things out. So if you'd seen the Christmas light picture up there, he would put up these crazy Christmas light displays, like put Clark Griswold to shame. And Kelsey and I would have to get out there and check every single light bulb in the strands and every single strand to try and figure that out. And then he'd put them all together in these crazy ways, and you'd have all the different circuits maxed out. And then I went into to engineering, and so did Kelsey. And again, back to the point about gender barriers, I think that's part of why Kelsey and I did that. Although we did inherit the math gene from mom. For those of you, Juliana, you probably know this, that was not Dad's forte. So I was in engineering school, we took electrical fundamentals, and I'm trying to, make this thing work, and my teacher's like, what are you doing? And it's like, you gotta put the ground there. And I'm like, what's the ground? He's like, when you have the 3 prongs, it's that one on the bottom that's important. And I'm like, no, Dad just taught that you took some pliers, you bent it until it came off, and then you filed it down and you plugged it in. And have you seen our house at Christmas? It worked just fine. So he was definitely favoring that practical side. And then another thing I loved about Dad was, Mom mentioned, he loved giving gifts. He was very thoughtful. He always remembered birthdays. Yeah, it was hard this last birthday when it wasn't well enough to call. But he gave the best gifts. So always, he would frequently give flowers, which is something the only person I really like getting flowers from is Dad, because I'm like, they last for a few days and then they get wilty. So, like, Jeffrey gets me bouquets of broccoli, and I'm like, I can eat it. But I love getting flowers from Dad, and he'd always find these gifts, and I'm like, where did you think of this? Like these crazy tools for my bicycle that have actually really saved my bacon a couple times, and I'd always call him to thank him for that. And then coming back to the part about Dad loving to have fun, I forgot my prop. Can you give me the monkey? So once I moved back to DC, I think maybe this was before, but I would meet Dad for like dinner, for birthdays or Christmas, and Dad loved the Rhinelander. And so I'm opening gifts, and you never knew what you were going to get from Dad. And so I open it, I'm like, it's a stuffed monkey. All right, thanks, Dad, this is cool. He's like, oh no, this is no just stuffed monkey. And so he takes the monkey, and this is in the middle of the Rhinelander, like full restaurant. And unfortunately, it's howled out, but it was like the squealing monkey, and you would throw it. I'm a terrible thrower. And it would shriek, it would like howl, it was like this, whee! And he just takes it, hucks it across the Rhinelander, and you hear this like, whee! And everyone's like, what? And he's just laughing, and he's like, isn't that the best thing ever? I'm like, wow, Dad. So I still have the monkey, and unfortunately he doesn't squeak anymore. But great example of just how Dad knew how to make people laugh. He could always think of fun things to bring a smile to my face, and I have so many of those memories, a lot of which have been brought back by these photos. So those are a few things I learned from Dad, and stories, and I hope to hear a lot more of them from you. I've already heard a few tonight and look forward to it. So thanks. So I'll just add to this with the little sister perspective on some of these stories. Because as a second child, I think I was somewhat expendable. So the amazing haunted house, well, they started that when I was only like 3 or 4 years old. And do you know where they kept all the stuff? She talked about the bloody hanging bodies and the scary monsters. They were in next to my room. And the attic door was in my room, and they never figured out how to secure it. And so every night when the wind blew, it would bang, and all these bodies and spiders and dead people were next to me in my room. So that was one of the things that built, I guess they call it character building. I became an engineer, and I've learned a lot of, we own a construction company, a lot of things you don't do now, but I love that my dad taught me to be fearless. When we decided to up the game of the Christmas lights one year, I think the Hogues might have gotten a leg up the year before. Dad decided we're going to put them all over the house, and our ladders weren't high enough. So he figured I was light enough that if he tied a rope around me, he could hang me out the window, and I could use the staple gun and attach the Christmas lights to the window, and I was pretty good at that. So we also didn't have phones without wires. Juliana, you have no idea what we're talking about. But it was a really big deal to become 13 in their house and get a phone But what that meant for a Taylor girl was you had to learn to wire a phone to your bedroom. So we actually got phones in our room by learning how to crawl around on sheds and roofs with a staple gun and wires until we got the phone to our room. So my dad taught us to be fearless. He taught us to go after our dreams. And he just had a heart of gold where he just cared about everyone around him. And even the last few years, he was, he was proud of our accomplishments, but what I loved most was he always brought me down to earth. He'd even say, Kelsey, that stuff's really not what matters, right? And I'd go, yeah, you're right. Because family and friends, and I think all of you in this room know that why my dad went to work in the morning was because of the people around him, because he loved making life better for the people around him and seeing how he could impact his community. And there's very few people who do that as authentically as my dad did. And I only hope that I can achieve that to a fraction of what he did. So thank you.
Thank you very much. That was great. It's great to hear from the family. I'll just tell a little short story about how I met Gary and how our little working career, because we worked together for a long time, off and on, different places. But I first, you remember there's some realtors in here. You remember that excitement when you passed your real estate exam? I'm going to go conquer the world. I'm going to go into real estate. And so in my interviewing process, I interviewed at the Stan Wiley Tigard office. Frank Hassaby was the manager and Gary Taylor was his assistant manager. That was 1973. I met Gary, and I ended up going to work for Stan Wiley, but not in that office. But it was fun. And we worked together there, and then built in the Washington Square office, and I became there, and Gary became my manager there at the Washington Square office, and he wasn't always right with all his judgments. He promoted me to his assistant manager. And then he helped me, get me a manager job in the Hollywood office of Stan Wiley. And so we worked together as co-managers for a long time. Then Gary was an adventurous person. I mean, he was not going to just stick around and just do anything. He left and with a builder, I think with Maxwell Properties, and formed a real estate company. And I was still there. I wasn't quite so adventurous, and so but then came back. Then he went to work for the Lute Snyder Company, and he was manager of their Hall Boulevard office. Well, at that time, we lived in Greenway, which was right across the street, and I was manager of the Stan Wiley Moreland office, and the Taylor family was living on Nixon Avenue in West Lynn on the river. And so we used to talk, they'll say, if it snows, Gary, you go to the Moreland office, and I'll go to the Lute Snyder office, and we'll manage each other's office. It worked out great. Then we had other times together, and then finally he got hired away by Greg Hoffman, Professionals 100. He built the #1 office in Oregon in the Sunset Corridor. It was a tremendous office, top producing office, great people, great agents, and they did a great job. And years later, I tried a couple times, because I went to work for the Equity Group. We managed to hire Gary to come over and manage our Tualatin office and Sunset Corridor office. So we had a great time working together. But they said he was a mentor. He trained you to do better, and he helped me, and he helped my career go. And then that was just awesome. I really appreciate that. But then you go back to the family side, and Mindy and Kelsey, and our daughters, Amy and Denise, and we had many pizzas. I can't tell you how many pizzas. Then the Whitings, Gary's here. We had so many pizza dinners, had a great time together. We vacationed the beach, we vacationed in Sun River, and so we had a great time together. It was just a fun time. Gary was a very smart guy, but he was also, like everybody said, a lot of fun, and he just wanted to have fun, and he was great. We had a great time working together. And with that, I think Carolyn wants to share a little bit of some of the fun.
So he mentioned the office on Hall Boulevard. 1985, I was hired to manage the Tigard office. And so I met Gary at that time, and I can't say that we really hit it off. He kind of like, who is this upstart, you know? And so I'm the youngest of 5 with 2 older brothers, so I knew how to handle these guys. I just remember he and I taught at PCC continuing ed classes together. Finally, I think getting involved in the Oregon Association of Realtors in PMAR, he and I started kind of getting to know each other, and really bad jokes. And I got to thinking lately about what I want to tell you about my buddy Gary, my buddy of 35 years. And it's the lightness, and I was almost channeling him, thinking about, why are you reminding me of these esoteric, crazy, little fun times we had? But let me tell you of a couple of them. I heard something the other day on my spiritual guide Facebook, and it said, soon you'll be a memory. Make it a good one. And I thought about that in Gary's passing. He left a lot of good memories. When I was thinking about that, I'd talk about him today. I thought it wasn't the memories of managing or of serving and Realtor of the Year and Sales Associate of the Year, Broker of the Year, and all the wonderful things that he achieved. It was the fun times. Like an older brother, I always felt safe with Gary. I have my husband of 40 years out here, and he let me ride off with Gary to these meetings, and Gary insisted on driving if we had a meeting in Sun River or Black Butte. And there's 2 of the memories that I want to mention. One of them is about that. He'd drive me to OAR business meeting in Sun River. He'd pick me up in his big Chrysler, throw in an Elvis tape, notice I said tape, or Frank Sinatra, and we'd be on our way. However, every McDonald's or Plaid Pantry, it was green. Get out and get me some chocolate chip cookies. I don't ever remember him calling me Carolyn. I only remember him calling me Green. And usually he called me Mother Green. But that's another story. We played golf together. In fact, when I saw Gary in November at St. Vincent's, and I wasn't quite prepared for the image of my big, strong friend, seeing him, and they made me put on everything, and I went in, and he looked at me and he says, "Hi, hon, you want to go play golf?" And I thought about our most famous golf tournament. One of our most infamous golf tournaments was at Rock Creek, a PMAR golf tournament. We were playing in a foursome, I think, with this guy over here, my other big brother. And Gary and I were in a cart, and of course, the food cart went by, and Gary said, "Green, get out and get me some chocolate chip cookies." So I offered to drive so he could eat said cookies. I think there was a Snicker in there too. He said no, he never let me drive the golf cart, ever. And as there's a overpass, and there's another golf path that goes underneath this little thing, making a little tunnel. And as Gary and I were going down there, he's eating with both hands. We get stuck. The cart tips into the groove between the grass and the concrete. You remember this, don't you?
Yes, I do.
And being a couple of kind of larger people, we couldn't correct and right the cart. So we're laughing hysterically. I'm yelling for help. And he finished the cookies. That was it. So we were at a good tilt. People were coming by. And I reminded Gary of that, and he remembered it, and he talked about the good laughs. He was my big brother. He was my big brother for many years. We shared for 2 managers to kind of give away your secrets. Give away, I'd say, I've got to do a class on this, and he'd say, well, let me help you with an outline. Or he'd call me and say, what would you do about this? How would you say it? And I'm so grateful to see our family here, the family of realtors. And many, many years of good memories to honor this good man. I thank you to his family for the great memories too. So it wasn't the honors, it wasn't his intelligence or his fantastic, you know what a great writer he was? Marvelous writer. It was the crazy fun times, my friend and my big brother. That's what I'm going to remember about you. Thank you.
That was not Rock Creek, that was Indian Creek up at Hood River.
No, that was
anyway, that
was another time.
yeah. And we're going to open up now. We want everybody to share that wants to tell a story, but Mindy and Kelsey reminded me so much of Gary Fixes Anything. We bought a cabin up at Mount Hood. It was a little cabin on Clear Creek up off of Lola Pass Road, and I needed to put a hot water heater in. And Gary said, okay, we'll do it. So we came up there, and I thought he was going to kill himself. He wired that hot water heater in hot without the power off. I stood back, but it was. And the other time, let's see, I think Kathy needed a new radio in her car, and he put a new radio in her car, and whenever if the cigarette lighter was hit, the rear windshield wiper. He could fix anything, but maybe not quite the way they wanted it. Anyway, it was great. So, okay, now we'd like to have an open mic and let somebody tell their favorite Gary Taylor stories. So we'd love to have you step up and do that.
Hi, I'm Paul Chomanek. Gary was my brother-in-law for over 3 decades. And all of my memories of Gary always make me smile. He was a big guy, as Todd said, and everything he did was big. He did the biggest haunted house. It was legendary in West Lynn. I heard once that he did the biggest rock garden fountain in the backyard. Totally dedicated himself to it. I also heard that he had over 14,000 Christmas tree lights on his house. Now there's a business that's going to miss Gary. Anyway, but everything Gary did seemed to be big. His humor was big. The biggest thing about him was his heart.
Hi, my name is Dawn Trino, and I wasn't very close to Gary the last few years, but I was with Equity Group for 17 years, and at one point he was our branch manager, always had the right answers, and really funny sales meetings. But one day stands out very much in my life on a personal level. January 14th, 1997, my only son was in a bad accident. His father was out of town, my family was far away, and Gary, they life flighted Nathaniel to Emmanuel, and Gary took me there. He stayed with me for like 11 hours until my husband could get there and my family. Unfortunately, Nathaniel passed away on the 17th, and for many, many years, on the 17th of January, Gary sent me a card. When I was fortunate enough to have my son Zachary, Gary was at the hospital. This is pretty unheard of for your branch manager to come to the hospital when you have a baby. And I think Kurt Dolby came too, so it was a pretty cool day. Anyway, and then with Facebook, every time I post a memory of Nathaniel, he said something very kind. So that was a big day in my life, and he made a big difference. He'll be missed.
I don't know if you guys knew that, but Gary had a weight problem. He fought weight, I remember when I first went to work with Gary in the Washington Square office, he was around 200 pounds, and he had a doctor that he was seeing. He saw the doctor every Friday, and he had to weigh in. And if he weighed more than what he was supposed to, he had to pay double for the appointment. And if he weighed less, then he got the appointment free. And so he would starve himself all week. Starve himself. He'd go to that appointment, he'd come back down, Jim, let's go, we're gonna go eat. So we'd take off a big lunch that day. But anybody else wants to share a Gary Taylor story? Come on up.
I'm Ray Klassen. I've known Gary since certainly high school and through college. I was not a member of Sigma Tau officially, but I went to a lot of their parties and celebrations over the years, and got to know Gary quite well. We actually lived together in a little ramshackle house on Goring Street back in 1967, I think it was. One incident that I probably shouldn't admit or talk about. One evening, Gary and I were watching television and perhaps having a few beers. We decided it would really be neat to make our TV which is a 1967 console, look a little better. We had some beautiful wood grain contact paper. And we commenced papering that TV. We covered part of the screen and some of the dials, and back then you had all kinds of dials on your TV. They didn't have remotes. But when we finished, we thought, what a great project we just completed. Anyway, I remember early days going camping with Gary and Kathy and my wife Ellen and I at Sand Lake down by Pacific City. And Gary put together a couple of dune buggies. And we would go down there and do the craziest things, no helmets, no seat belts. And we would go over those dunes and almost tip them over. We never did, but I don't know why. And we go camping in the rain and just had some wonderful times. I also had great times with Gary rafting on the Sandy River. Of course, no life jackets, and we'd go on the rapids, we'd spill out of the rubber raft and climb back in and continue on, and didn't think anything of it. The last time I saw Gary was with Skip Roberts, and it was about 2 or 3 days before he died. And we went up and visited him, and he was actually pretty alert, and we were able to tell jokes and reminisce, and he smiled and laughed and chuckled, and it was just a great visit. Probably one of the things that really touched me, and people have said a lot about what a great person Gary was, when my mother died a few years ago, I was at the funeral and I looked out in the back of the audience, or the congregation, and there was Gary. And I hadn't seen him for several years before this happened, but he was there just to support me, and an act of love and friendship, and I really appreciated that. And he's a great guy.
Thank you very much. Do we have another volunteer coming up?
It's a traditional song that we have from the fraternity club. Come drink, oh come drink beer with me, for I don't give a damn for any old man who won't drink beer with me. Break out that old gold goblet with the Sigma Tau upon it, and let's have another keg of beer, for it's not for knowledge that we come to college, but to drink beer while we're make love while we're raise hell while we're here. Hooray for Gary, hooray at last, hooray for Gary, he's a horse's ass.
Well, first, if you don't know it, all of those guys went to the University of Portland, the Catholic college. They didn't do any of those things according to the literature. We all went to public universities. We never sang songs like that. Never drank. I want to share one story that reflects Gary to me. Is I retired a couple of years ago, and they had a little shindig for me, and they invited community members, and it was sort of one of those boring, dry retirement things that you've all been to. But one of the pieces they did during the thing was to allow an open mic like this, and for some reason, I think all of the siblings got up there, and at some point he may have been the last person up there. And of course, it took Gary a while to get up. It was on an elevated stage, and he was real slow. And of course, by that time, people are pretty tired, ready to probably leave. And Gary gets up there, and he just knocks the house off. He did nothing but tell. Of course, people had told all these lies about me, trying to how great I was. And Gary got up there to set the record straight, and he did. And the next day, I had somebody come up to me and say, I really kind of liked the thing they had for you. You know, most of the time those things are really dry and boring. But your brother, that big guy, he was hilarious. So he was stealing the show just a couple of years ago. But one of the stories he told, he actually told both these stories, and one when I was about that tall and he was big enough to be using a push broom in the basement of our house in Alameda. He was teasing me and doing something, and I told him, I said, if you do that again, I'm going to hit you with that broom. And of course he laughed and went about his thing and teased me again. And he did it 2 or 3 times, and I don't have any recollection of this, but apparently I did. I took this push broom and hit him over the head, split his head open, and he started crying, and Mom came down, and of course he tells everybody this story, and of course people are going. And then the other one he had to tell was, I was in high school and I hadn't had my license very long, and my parents were the proud owner of one of the second cars, was like a 60-something Falcon, the Ford Falcon. And Gary was going to college, and he may have been in Portland years or maybe a little later, and he was working a summer job as a hod carrier, making good money, and we're driving down 57th just below Rose City School at very early in the morning because I had to take him to his job as a hod carrier before I went out to my little high school job. And I managed to, I was swatting a fly on the windshield of the car, and instead of swatting the fly, I turned the wheel over and hit a parked car, just square on in the back. And of course, shockingly, Gary didn't have a seatbelt on, and he managed to break his nose, and he got off work for a week and ended up losing his job, and he never forgave me. So he had a great sense of humor, but most people have shared already the other things about Gary, but he was also very free with his advice. You could call him up and ask him a question about something, and he was very, very smart. I mean, he had more gray matter than I've lost in my life, and very, very smart guy in addition to being humorous, and we'll all miss him. The last thing I'd like to do is recognize a couple of people and thank a couple siblings in particular. Todd, in particular, for all of the time and hours and love that you shared with Gary in the end. Being as close as you were, and I'm proud to have you as the oldest now. And Sister Jan, being the other closest to him, spent a lot of time. I want to thank you for it, and love you for it. And the big guy, we'll see you sometime.
Mine is just real quick. Gary was my older brother, as in 9 years older than me, so he was gone from the house. He was at the seminary or at college, and then he was in the military, and I was just this little bratty kid. But I do remember, and I thanked him the last time I saw him for teaching me how to ride my bicycle without the training wheels. I still remember going down the block, and he's running along behind me, and the training wheels are off, and I'm pedaling away, and then and he'd catch me, and pretty soon I was riding on my own, and I was, wow, this is so cool. And I thanked him for getting me on my own and off on my bike and touring the neighborhood now, because now I could go anywhere and everywhere. And it was just awesome. And he also taught Mindy. Although Mindy came home after what? She
ran behind you, let go, and I didn't realize he. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is good. Oops, there goes my water. Yeah, so he's running behind me, and I had like the big old banana seat with the handle on it, and so he's running behind me. I'm like, cool, pedaling. And then I'm going, focusing on where I'm going, and then I look around like, oh, hey, Dad. And I look around, and Dad's not there because he'd let go. And so in the process of turning around, I turned the handlebars. And I turned it and went right off the road, right into the ditch, right into the blackberries. And just was covered in blackberries. And that was one of those, like, yeah, totally, like, thorns all over. And it was like, oh, we gotta go back. And so then Mom soaked me in the bathtub to get all the thorns out of me. But I do credit Dad with teaching me how to ride a bicycle, which I've raced my bike now, so that is one more thing I can thank Dad for.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Courtney Clark. I'm with Summa Real Estate Group, and I actually worked with Gary Taylor in the last 5 years. He was probably one of the greatest mentors I ever had. And I just wanted to share a couple of stories. I'll try to clean them up because I know that there's a few kids in the crowd. But there were a couple of things that had stood out, and I wanted to let all of the family know that truly he talked about all of you all the time. Really said really kind things about all of you, and he really loved all of you. He really had such a great, funny disposition, and he said lots of things that were absolutely hilarious, and he really did make such a difference in our brokerage, kind of sometimes boring meetings, but he really did make them fun. But I will tell you that there's one thing that stood out to me. He did, he used to use comedy or things that were funny to make things that were serious not so serious, right? And so one time I actually came into him and I said, I have a seller. Well, I'm not even sure that the seller was the problem. I think the co-op, for all of you real estate agents, you understand what I'm talking about. I think that the cooperating broker was a little bit neurotic, but I came into him and I said, I don't know what to do. I just don't know what to do. So he read over the file, we went over everything, and he said, and I'm going to censor myself, he said, why don't you give me your computer and I will write the addendum for you. I said, all right, perfect, great. So I've been working for him for a couple of years now. He's taught me a lot of great things, and he starts typing away, click, 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 and then he turns it back around to me and says, what do you think about that? And I read over the addendum and I just start laughing because by this time the addendum says, go blank yourself. Right? And he said, what do you think about this addendum? And I said, I can't present that addendum. And he said, why not? Because I think that's where you're at right now. And I laughed and laughed and laughed. And he said, why don't you like my addendum? And I said, I really need you to help me do constructive things here. But I mean, he really was such a fantastic PB. I mean, you know, what did you say? I did actually close the deal, but I did not write that addendum, by the way. We erased it and wrote a whole new one. So, I mean, he really was just such a fantastic person. I mean, you know, I think I speak from all of the previous brokers who worked for him, young, old, new. You know, he was really a fantastic person, and he taught me so much about real estate, and I feel like I'm a success. Partly because of him, because he really was such a great person. So I just wanted to come up here and tell that story because it really is one of my favorite stories. I have lots of them. If you guys want to come find me, I've got lots of them. They're way dirtier than that, but really fun. And I do appreciate you all inviting us as agents and brokers because he really was a fantastic agent. So thank you.
My name's Tom Eder. I'm one of the infamous fraternity brothers that Gary so foolishly hung around with. And shortly after we graduated from college, I was working out in Cornelius for Standard Oil, and Gary had found a place out in Linton. And it was the upstairs of this very old house, and they had 2.5 bedrooms. Now the half bedroom was literally the closed off steps that went up to the second floor, and they nailed them shut. And so Gary and I were living there originally, and then a third member, Mike McClellan, also a fraternity brother, moved in with us. Well, it was kind of like, and I love Gary, so bear with me, it was kind of like Oscar and Felix, and I was somewhere in the middle. Because there wasn't a lot of housekeeping like Gary and my part. So we called it the Bay of Pigs. And it lived up to its name, because a lot of times, and beer was involved usually when most of this happened, but we would be sitting around talking, telling stories. There'd be a coffee table, and we'd have a couple of chairs around it. Gary smoked at the time, and he would be talking and flick his cigarette. Well, the ashtray was here, and the ashes were over here. So Mike would move the ashtray over, and Gary would flick them here, and Mike slide the ashtray that way, back and forth, back and forth. So one time, Gary, part of his Army requirements, sent him down to California for, I think it was 2 weeks of active duty, and at that time you couldn't get Coors beer. So he came back from his 2 weeks of active duty with 8 cases of Coors beer. We're going, thank you, Jesus, because couldn't get beer in. So Gary being very generous, we drank, I don't know, it didn't take us very long, we drank all 8 cases of beer, put the stubbies back in the cases, stacked the stubbies in this little cubby hole. Now remember, we're on the 2nd story of this house. Well, about a week or 2 later, we had ants everywhere, going all through the house, but the beer was the big attraction. And then the last piece of this, and I don't know how we ended up getting the keys, but Kathy, I hope, will forgive us, but when Gary and Kathy got married, Gary had told me that he had rented this little apartment on 30th and Ainsworth. It was above a drugstore. And I don't know if he gave me the key or somebody in the group the keys to put the wedding presents in the apartment while they're on their honeymoon. So we went in there and we filled literally the bedroom this full of newspapers from wall to wall. I don't know where we got the newspaper. We filled it, and then in the bathtub, we filled the bathtub up, filled it, I think, with either lime or cherry Jello. It was lime, and then before it hardened, we threw a big squid in there in the middle of it. So that's what they had waiting for them when they got home from their honeymoon.
So hi, I'm Justin. The thing about Gary was, I owe this to him, is that he signed me up to stand in front of a whole bunch of strangers and talk publicly, completely outside of my comfort zone. And I come into work one day, he says, hey, I signed you up to talk on a panel. So I just wanted to thank Gary, and I owe it to him. And there's not a lot of guys out there like him. He's incredible, and he will be missed. So he pushed me outside of my comfort zone and was instrumental in the early part of my career. So just a really, really stand-up guy, and he'll be missed.
I just want to thank the family for the honor of asking me to stand up here for my buddy. I want to thank you for your grace. And I appreciate hearing this because I knew him, and I will miss him. And I'm still going to talk to him when crazy things happen and tell him he would have loved it. Thank you all for coming. We appreciate it. What a celebration. I can't imagine that he had wanted any other way. Thank you.
One of my first memories of meeting Gary, like from the moment that we met Gary, he treated us like family. And I was young when I met Gary too. I mean, we were all really young when we met Gary. But I think what I remember most was like his funny jokes, but also his big bear hugs that he would give us. His bear hugs were awesome. And every time we'd go over to their house or whatever, I would always, I would like his bear hugs. Look forward to that. But I also remember like the first Christmas that we had together as a family, and I mean, we never really had that many gifts, and Gary always made sure that we each had a gift. And not just one gift, but like several little gifts.
I mean,
and
like the whole room was just filled with
when we walked in the room, it was filled with toys and gifts, and we're like, wow. Like it was really humbling, and like you said earlier, Gary was a really gadget man. So he would give us like these little gadget toys. They were really fun. He did give us a monkey too. It's actually a slingshot. I don't know if yours is a slingshot too, Mindy. But yeah, we had a blast slingshotting those around the whole house. It got kind of annoying.
Like after the first week,
I know,
wanted
we
to
always
like
did that. Like,
yeah, and he would always, encourage us, especially because I think finishing high school, and he'd always encourage me to go to college, encourage our education, and to be fearless and keep going. And he'd always offer to help us with everything. I'd always send him my college essays, always make him look over my resume, or or how to prepare for an interview. I had no idea, and he would always give me good tips. I mean, I don't know, and even just sometimes I'd ask him for life advice, like, what do you think about this kind of thing, and he'd just like give the most obvious answer that you kind of already knew, and just when he'd hear it, he'd be like, oh, you're right, I should have just done that, but, so I always, loved Gary for that. And then also, he really loved dry humor. And so it's pretty funny when we would have a really serious family discussion or a family conversation in a text or something, and he'd just say a joke and liven up the mood, and it'd just be really funny. He would send a funny picture through text, like a dark humor kind of thing, and I would be the only one laughing in the text, and everybody'd be like, Gary, come on, we're being serious. And I'm like, come on, everybody, just laugh. Like, it's not a big deal, So. Yeah, I don't know.
I remember in middle school, during the summers of middle school, I never was into Harry Potter or anything, just because my parents never allowed me to watch it. So I was like, okay, whatever. But he's like, have you ever read Harry Potter and watched the movies? I was like, no, why would I want to? It's like, no, it's weird. But then I remember one time after I watched the first movie, it was pretty awesome, and then like a week straight after that, we just binge watched Harry Potter.
Yeah, that was one thing. Like,
we ate pizzas like every day. We literally woke up like at 9 a.m. and then until midnight was when we finished watching.
Those were some of my favorite memories. Is geeking out with Gary, watching like Harry Potter or Star Wars, Lord of the Rings.
That was a huge marathon.
Yeah, because I mean, my parents aren't that much into like fantasy movies or any of that, so we would totally geek out with Gary, and we were so excited. And of course, like I remember Gary always liked his gadgets, and he would always have like a sound speaker system, and then one time he upgraded and he's like, check this out, and it was like the theme song of Star Wars or something, and it was like
that was pretty cool. You felt the bass in your heart.
We're like,
awesome.
Yeah, Gary, this is awesome. And we'd get all the popcorn and all that stuff. It was pretty funny.
I mean, going back to Christmas, I remember we also did the Christmas light setup with him too.
Oh yeah.
We never put Christmas lights in our house, and that was like a first time for us. And yeah, I remember.
That's what we loved about Gary too, is that he really kept like all the American traditions, and so we really look forward to like all the holidays, because he was
especially like a Christmas tree.
Yeah, Christmas. That was like our first time decorating a Christmas tree. My family was just really like conservative, and so that was really fun. He had so many Christmas decorations.
Yeah,
so,
it was crazy.
Yeah, and I don't know what you want to do.
Well, for me personally, I didn't know Gary that much. Like, I try to remember all the memories we had with him, and in general, every time we see Gary, every time we went to Adriana's house, we always have a good time with him talking, and like he'd be always watching TV, and we could talk to him just like freely and like as a family member, like he was just really kind and comfortable to talk to, and I just wish I could have gotten to know him better. I've heard so many stories about him being in his young years, and I hear like really good. He was in the World War II. Vietnam War? Oh. Anyway. Yeah, I think it was World War II. But anyway, like.
But yeah, hearing about Gary's.
It's kind of incredible just how his life has been stacked up until the end, and been doing a lot of good things for people, and just I don't know, it's just kind of unbelievable. Like such a guy could do all that and like still be the same, never changing, always being loving till the end, no matter what. And even his dogs, I feel like they miss him already. Like I feel bad for his dogs already, and I don't know. I really loved him, and
yeah, we all really love Gary.
Yeah,
we really miss him.
He was always, every time we go to the movies, there'd be a new movie, we'd always go with him. He'd get us tickets, and I always remember him.
Snacks. I'd be like, Gary,
yeah,
no, we could just
exactly.
You could go to the 7-Eleven. He's like, no, we'll buy them for you.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, okay.
He's been generous enough to buy us stuff always, especially during the holidays. Thanksgiving was a big meal, and it was always a memorable time with him. At first, I always felt intimidated talking to him at first, to be honest. Like, I don't know, there was always a vibe that he was always, you know, kind of strong and a big man, you know, and like, I don't know.
Well, even to the end when we visited Gary, he still kept his sense of humor and just stayed strong throughout the whole thing. And so, yeah. We'll miss you, Gary. Miss you all the time, and we love you. We love you, Gary.
Love you, Gary.
Okay, way back in the early years, Gary and Kathy had purchased a new house in Multnomah, and it had an in-ground swimming pool, which was pretty rare for our crowd. Anyway, it was winter time. There was snow on the ground, and the pool was heated probably to 100 degrees, steam coming off the pool, and Ellen and I and Gary and Kathy decided to take a swim. We swam for a long time. We may have even skinny dipped. I can't remember for sure. Anyway, we did that several different weekends, and then Gary and Kathy got the real utility bill for this swimming pool. They had only been in the house for a few weeks, so the bills they had gotten were really estimates based on the previous owner, who didn't bother to heat it in the wintertime. So when they got the real bill, it was probably 10 times what they had anticipated. And of course, there were some problems. I think Kathy eventually was able to negotiate the bill down a bit, but the evening swims in their 100-degree pool ended abruptly after that until summertime. And that's the rest of the story.
Okay. Gary was my stepdad because my real dad wasn't really there, but my mom started working for Gary when she was pregnant with me, and I've known him since I was like a baby. And a lot of people tonight talked about how he was very caring and how he was really funny and how he always wanted to support others. And I think that's really true. When I was younger, I would go into his office with my mom, and he would let me open his letters and make a mess on his desk because the mess was already there and I wasn't really adding that much to it. So he would sit me down on his lap and he would give me his letters and his little letter opener, and I would just open letter by letter, and he would save them each day for me. I think I appreciated Gary the most because he was my stepdad officially, but I think really he was my dad, and he may not have been my biological dad, but he was the one who was always there for me and for my mom, and that really meant a lot to us because he was the closest thing I had to Dad, and now that he's gone, it's really sad, and I miss him a lot. He always made me laugh, and he always, when I was younger, when he picked me up, we would play hangman in the car, and I remember one time I spelled a word and it was pizza, but all I kept saying was, I don't know what pizza means. I was like, what is pizza? And he's like, it's a big round thing. And he started getting kind of mad, but he thought it was funny too, because he's like, a big round thing with cheese on it. And I was like, what? Like garlic bread? I don't know what that is. He's like, pizza, it's pizza. And I was like, oh, okay. And then we just kept playing because he thought it was funny, and I don't know, I mean, there's so many stories I could tell you, but overall, Gary was just a really funny guy, and even my friends who had never met him loved him. Like, I would tell them so many stories, and they would just laugh and laugh because Gary was just that type of person who, even if you hadn't met him, you would still love him as a person.
For me, Gary was someone who came right to our family, and he just right away fitted in. He filled that male figure that we all kind of long for as far as mentoring and supporting, and he just really loved family time, and I really remember that from him. He always embraced us and never doubted to ever offer his support or just offer his humor, his advice. He has always had open arms in his house. When it was dinner time, he liked to joke around and eat food, and it was just a happy time. I remember he always wanted to watch soccer, and he would take us to the Timbers games, and that was a big fun thing for him to do. And he enjoyed taking us and all us being there watching the games, and just always, it was just something that he wanted to always include us, and it was felt like, gosh, Gary, you didn't have to do that, but he just wanted to take all of us, and we always had a blast going there. I have a lot of memories, but overall, I always remember Gary as with a big smile, with a lot of love, sharing it with us, and I really will miss him, and the family will miss him, and his boy will forever be there, but I have very strong memories. I'm happy that he met my sister, and I hope that that we will always keep his advices and everything he taught us in our minds, because it was just a man who always has something to teach us every time. And I love him dearly and remember him always, and we will miss him. Thank you.
So I just want to say that I found it kind of funny that everybody else told their stories about Gary teaching them how to ride a bike, because Gary taught me how to ride a bike, and was pushing me down a hill, and I was picking up speed, getting some confidence, and I looked back and I said, Gary, don't let go, and hell, he'd already let go, and he just let out a big laugh. I've already have let go. Down the hill I went and fell over, but he taught me like everybody else that you've heard from. That was so wonderful. Also gave me my first 10-speed bike. So what I remember about my brother most, his big laugh, his big heart, his big smile, and I miss him, and hope to see him sometime. So,
Prost.
Prost.